Yesterday, the season finale for The Boys Season 4 dropped, so let's talk about it. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies and TV way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comments section. Let me know, what did you think about The Boys Season 4 and the finale specifically? This is a spoiler review, so feel free to spoil away down in the comment section. And if you haven't watched the episode yet, if you haven't watched the season yet, go watch the season, then come over here and join the conversation. And in a couple of days, I am planning on ranking all 4 seasons of The Boys with Gen V as well as Diabolical. So if you want to know my thoughts on the full Boys universe, come back in a few days to check that out. And let's get started with the review. And to kick things off with my overall thoughts, this was a very frustrating season. It had a lot of the best and the worst of The Boys, and the best parts were elements, sequences, a character, a performance, a scene, more so than the season overall, where I felt like it meandered a lot, and then something brilliant would happen. Something great would happen that reminded me of everything that I enjoy about this show, and then it would go back to meandering through too many plot lines and not really able to find its focus, the right tone, or handle things as sharply as it has in the past. So with that as the context for this review, let's get started with the good. As I just mentioned, I felt, generally speaking, that the best elements of the season, for the most part, were an episode, a character, a sequence, an element, rather than the big picture stuff. There's a big exception to that, and that would be the conspiracy by the Supes to try and assassinate the would-be president, and tying it into the political world of the TV show. And in doing so, with Homelander and his crew having their own evil plan, something they're working towards, it gives urgency to what the boys are trying to do and in trying to stop him. And it kind of adds just a little bit more intrigue. It's a new element, or, we've always had some politics in the mix, but getting into this full-blown political conspiracy to put someone as the president and the trickle-down and all of that, and what that will mean, that raises the stakes. It gives this threat that has a deadline to it that we're working to stop. And in particular, as you move into the finale, it starts getting really, really scary as certain people dying, certain actions happening dramatically change the dynamics of the show. And as you move into the final sequence of it, and we realize that the boys have kind of fallen into the trap, things have happened anyway, things have been revealed anyway, you see that as the final little bit there at the end, with that cool song kicking in, is people being arrested, pulled away, and you're like, oh man, what on earth does this mean for the final season of the show? Where are they going with this? How are we going to get out of this mess? So when that kicked in, the show got really good. When it was kind of focused on some of those elements, it was fresh and new. Other fun things in the season, like when I saw the trailer and they had chickens and goats flying up and they go, oh, they got beat up barn animals. It's like, yes, the boys right there. Yes, that's what I want to see. And when you get to the episode and they're researching all this stuff and chickens start flying around and goats are killing people and they're trying to figure out what to do about all of this, it was really good. And it was ultra violent and gory, but in the good version of that, it played into what they were doing. It made sense. It was something fresh and new. And it's an interesting idea. Like, if you give V to a person, this is what happens. What happens when you put it in a cow? What would that do? What does a creature that has no mindset of what it's doing with incredible power, what does it do when it becomes super? That's interesting. Of course, the other one you have to talk about, Homelander, when he goes to the lab with the scientists that experimented on him. Just such a great sequence runs throughout the whole episode. It's not just even a sequence, but so the whole time you're like on the edge of your seat, both wanting to see what he's going to do, also terrified for how he's going to do it, unpacking why Homelander is such a psycho. To some extent, understanding why did they treat him the way they did. and the very odd way in which that they raised him and they were afraid of him, their fear of him created the monster that they were afraid of that is now coming back to kill them. There's just like a lot of dramatic irony in that. There's a lot of self-fulfilling prophecies in that. And just as a performance from Anthony Starr, like you're seeing this guy. I mean, his performance, it's such a unique character who walks around with so much confidence in a sense, but also is so deeply insecure at a foundational level, just unbelievably vulnerable in a sense while being invulnerable, and communicating so much through like a lip twitching or just like eyebrows moving, and you know exactly what he's thinking. And it's not overacting. It's just very good, nuanced acting with this character that there's not a lot of points of reference. We've seen, great performance of someone in trauma, crying, all sorts of things that you think of great performances, but we've seen other versions of that. And this character, this performance feels like something new and different. And it kind of has to be because of who Homelander is. Other fun things in here, having watched Gen V just a couple months back, leading up to this season, I thought they actually did a really good job of incorporating just enough Gen V to where if you haven't seen Gen V, you're not like, there's a few things where you're like, who are these people that just showed up? But at the same time, people just show up all the time. These characters that kind of like show up that have superpowers or whatever all the time. And so they're able to have these people show up and you don't think anything of it if you haven't seen Gen V. And if you have, you realize all of the interconnectedness of the shows that was done, I would say, really well. Even from the beginning, like, we found a virus that can kill soups. They can just say that in the episode and they fill in the audience that hasn't seen Gen V. And if you've seen Gen V, you're like, the horror story that created that virus. And this is maybe a little bit tying into the world of Gen V, but a lot of what is kind of, I think they've done well in the spinoff is having a spinoff that flips the perspective to where we're watching the horrific things that had to take place for this virus to be created, and we sympathize with the soups that are in the middle of that conspiracy. And then over on this show, it's like, oh, we have the weapon that might be able to stop this horrible threat that is Homelander. And the interconnectedness there. And the different perspectives, both using the same plot device from very different points of view. Thought that, once again, handled really nicely. Pretty cool. And then I think it ended on a high note where you did feel the crescendo of everything from the season getting to this point where you're like, oh, it's going down. Oh, okay, this is what's oh man, that's how this played out. I think there was just a lot of things that were really nice. Like, even in the finale, I have some pacing issues. We'll get into that with the season overall. But the feeling leaving it was like, that's what I wanted more of this season. And so there was things in here I really dug, that I liked, that were great. And there was a lot that was very frustrating. Today's video is brought to you by Factor. We are deep into the summer. Here in Texas, it's over 100 degrees every single day, and you can fuel up for those warm summer days with no prep, no mess meals from Factor. You can meet your wellness goals thanks to the menu of chef-crafted meals with options like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. I'm a high-protein, low-carb kind of guy, so I usually go for Keto or Protein Plus. Factor's fresh, never-frozen meals are dietitian-approved and ready to eat in just 2 minutes, so no matter how busy you are, you always have time to enjoy a nutritious, great-tasting meal. With 35 different meals and more than 60 add-ons to choose from every week, you'll always have new flavors to explore. I personally like to kick off my days with their protein shakes. Make your day delicious from breakfast to dessert. Stay fueled with easy, nutritious options. Head to factormeals.com/SeanChandler50 and use code SeanChandler50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. That's code SeanChandler50 at factormeals.com/SeanChandler50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active. As I mentioned before, it was a very frustrating season though. And as much as there's great elements in there, a plot line that I think worked really nicely, that gave urgency, overall, I was very disappointed with this season. So let's move on to the bad. And at the core of so many of my issues with this season is that it felt to be the most disjointed season, where there were just way too many subplots going on that I didn't care about. And even the fact that there were so many subplots is kind of what led to there being like, oh, I really liked this season or sequence, this episode, this character, this thing right here, but not the season as a whole, because it was just so scattershot. And when you're hopping between all these subplots, you're not building momentum on any one thing. So you have a really solid main plot line to drive it with this conspiracy theory that needs to be stopped. And then even having like a virus that can kill Homelander and stop it, like in the moral discussions of should you release a virus that could cause this pandemic to stop something, which is worth. The elements are right there for something really good, but then we just start wandering around between all these things, and so it didn't even feel like those were really driving the plot line. They're just other subplots amongst a bunch of other subplots, So like of the worst in here, in particular in the first half of the season, like everything with Frenchie just felt like this horrible misfire of like, what on earth are we doing here? Like every time it cut to Frenchie, this is just baffling. They've spent 3 seasons making us want Frenchie to be with this one girl, like building up their rapport, their chemistry on the team, the dynamic between the two of them. And then the whole first half of the season, it keeps cutting to Frenchie is in a relationship with this guy that he killed the guy's family. And so it's just like on every level, what are you doing? What is this? You've been convincing us to like root for this over here. You've built towards this. And then now it's like this very like, what? Like it's designed to be like a self-hate plot line of he hates himself for loving this guy who he killed the family. Like it's so wrong, but just what are we doing here? While she's telling like, oh yeah, go for it. Yeah, go for it. That's great. And to just such a weird plot line, and then he's always on drugs or whatever, and just making him an uninteresting character, a frustrating character, and someone that's just stealing time from all the plot lines I do care about. Another one for me, I've never liked the Ryan plot line. I think that it's always been kind of a little bit of a drag on the show. I understand its purpose, and you have Homelander as someone that never had a dad, thinks he can be a great dad while being the worst dad on the planet. The complexity of Butcher's wife is raped and kidnapped to raise Homelander's son. And so Butcher has very complicated feelings towards this child, but it's also just always so unpleasant. Inherently, Ryan is kind of a dull character. There's only so much you can kind of do with them. So it's just always been frustrating. And it's kind of been in loop for 2 seasons now of Butcher, Homelander, Homelander. And then we add multiple new characters in without really cutting anyone. So then everyone's competing for time again on the screen. And in terms of our new characters, I think that, varying degrees of success of how they were done. Maybe I should have mentioned this earlier. Like, I generally speaking liked Firecracker and the concept of Firecracker. I don't like that her underlying motivation is just, Starlight was mean to me at a beauty pageant. Like, the idea that she's stuck on mean girl crap and now is a murderer and a psycho wanting the government to, whatever's going on. Like, I don't buy into that. But the idea of using this social media influencer that makes sense. That feels like some of the better satire they did in this season. Sister Sage to me felt like overstating this, but a dumb person writing a smart person, where if you don't understand what real intelligence is, you're just like, well, I mean, they can figure everything out. You get, like, when you get to the end of this season and Sage walks in and she's like, it all happened, all according to my plan, a little bit messy, a couple detours, but this is exactly what we wanted. And you're like, your master plan was that many of random events that happen to get you where you're going. Like, there's no intelligent explanation about how this was a master plan that she pieced together to make all these things happen and get us to the outcome that she wanted. It's just she walks in and goes, it was all part of the plan. Well, if you're not smart enough to write and explain how it was all part of the plan, you just say that. And that's so much how her intelligence is treated, that she just knows, well, if we do this, then that person will do that. Leaving out the fact that there's so many variables in reality that make it so you can't just predict what people will do. Like, you can't just do that. Like, especially at this level with this many moving parts where there's information that you do not have, you can't predict that. And when your plan is to know what the boys are going to do when you don't know them or what's happening in their office, like, just that stuff, that's not how what intelligence actually looks like. And so, yeah, not crazy about that in general. Just moving on to some other things here that were just frustrating. The show's always been intentionally edgy and shocking in its humor and its violence. That's what The Boys is. That's what it will always be. That's what it's supposed to be. Let's turn superheroes on their head. Let's go to the extreme. But at a certain point in time, it stops being edgy and it just starts being gross. And humor inherently is transgressive. You're supposed to cross the line, and that's what makes it amusing. You're doing something you're not supposed to do. And this one is always about just like further and further and further. But like here, it was just nasty. Like when we're doing the human centipede and like, just like, it's not clever. It's not witty. It's just, what's a gross thing we can do? What's a gross sight gag that we can throw in right here? How can we push the shocking sexual stuff further and further? And when you're just doing that, at a certain point in time, it's like, okay, the gimmick's up. You're just trying to outgross yourself. You're just trying to outshock yourself. And it stops being shocking. It's just like, really? This is what we're doing? And I think the ultimate example of that is the Huey episode, the controversial one where he's in the sex dungeon, where his dad has just died. He obviously is processing all of this. They send him in undercover. And unfortunately, this leads to him as this spider guy in a sex dungeon. Huey takes his place, ends up in a sex dungeon where he does not want to go to a sex dungeon, but the person he's playing apparently has ended up in this place. And so if you play out the logic of this, he's essentially being horribly sexually abused for the runtime of an episode for laughs while he's already in trauma. And there are interviews about this where they asked the showrunner to comment on it. So the interviewer asked him, let's start with the Tech Night sex dungeon part. Where did the idea come from it? Why did you bring Huey into the situation now, kicking him when he's down by having him sexually assaulted by his childhood hero after his dad just died? So right there, the question is pretty intense. Like, yeah, it's his childhood hero and his dad just died and he's sexually assaulted. How does he respond to it? Well, that's a dark way to look at it. We view it as hilarious. Now, reading it, you don't get the tone of what he's trying to say with this, but like when you just read that sentence, someone says, you didn't stop to think about the implications of this? Like, this is pretty dark. And he goes, yeah, I mean, it's a dark way to view it. We just think it's hilarious. Like, they never stopped to think about the implications of what they were doing. That this is a person that does not want to do this, that is already traumatized, and then you traumatize them. And it's not like he didn't know that. At the end of the episode, Huey breaks down saying, I'm not okay. So they did know. And they still put him in it. Like, okay, you want to like mess around with the idea of Batman. Okay, cool. That's what your show does. Why did you do this to Huey? That's the question. Why did you take the person in trauma? You know he's in trauma because you wrote it and you commented on it at the end of the episode and have him being sexually assaulted. Like that, there's not another way to like perspective on this. Like just because he is playing someone that wants to do these things or submits to these things doesn't mean he wants to. He obviously does not. And it's hilarious. That's a strange response. And this kind of continues later in the season where Starlight is replaced with someone else. And this other person, according to what we learned in the last one, they have sex 20 times. This is kind of inventive phrase. I don't know if it is a real phrase, but raped by fraud. That this is, once again, he would not have done that with this person if they knew who they were. He was lied to, he was deceived, and the show never acknowledges. Now, 2 episodes ago, we sexually assaulted him in a sex dungeon, and here he's raped by someone that he thinks is basically in disguise. And the episode, at the end of the finale, plays it as if Huey did something wrong. That he's the one, and Starlight's traumatized, so like her perspective is going to be great. Like she was just herself kidnapped and learns this information. So not entirely saying that she fully like play this as the full ethics of the show, morality of the show, but the only thing unpacking it is her being like, how dare you not, that's really messed up. Like that's like there's actual terrible implications, despite him in the moment being very much for it. There's terrible implications if you think through this, but that's not what the writers were doing. They're just trying to be edgy, pushing things, and not thinking through the reality of these choices. And the final thing you have to talk about with this season is the satire, where it was way more on the nose this time around. And as soon as the first episodes of the season dropped, that was the big topic of conversation. A bunch of people pushing back, being like, whoa, the subtlety's gone. This is so much more overt, on the nose, direct. And then the backlash to that, the rebuttal to that was like, oh, you guys just now figured out that The Boys was making fun of you? If that's not what that's not what the criticism was. The criticism wasn't, hey, The Boys is now making fun of me. The criticism was the satire is too on the nose. It's too overt. With this season, it's a lot more where they're like, yeah, we're trying to hold up a mirror to reality, just trying to hold it up. But when you start doing that, and we're just holding up a mirror, and there's just parallels to reality, I don't know. From the beginning, it felt like, I don't think these pieces entirely fit. I don't, like what you're referencing, that's not, like, I don't even know where you're going with some of this stuff other than to just point out a thing that happened in reality and reference an event that happened in real life, but mashing it into the world of The Boys and mashing it into your political perspective rather than just commenting on things. In the early seasons of the show, the creative team felt like they were calling out people in power. They were calling out the corruption that comes with power, wherever it's at. Politics, the media, corporations, religion. That's what they were against. Power. Everyone knows their political leanings, where they're coming from. That's not a secret. But the satire was against corruption that comes with power. Of course, the ultimate metaphor there being superheroes, people that they themselves are very powerful. What would happen if they became celebrities entangled in corporations, religion, and politics? But the ultimate criticism is against power. And as the show went along, it shifted from feeling like these outsiders calling out people in power to insiders calling out the other side. And those aren't the same thing. There's a little bit in here calling out, obviously it's heavily critical of the right, Trump, January 6th, like, it's very obvious what they're going for here. Of course, they've always rallied against religion, Christianity and the Christian subculture, all of that. They've always done that. But here it feels like, from an insider's perspective, against all of that, rather than we're calling out all people in power. There's little things making fun of, like, Disney's D23 and the Ice Capades and the celebrities doing their I take accountability talks where they're just shooting these videos where we're going to solve racism by celebrities saying, I own it or whatever. Like, those little moments happen. But the season is just so overwhelmingly from one perspective against the other perspective, not against power in general. And it's so much more overt, where at a certain point in time, when your satire is just referencing things, it kind of stops being satire. You're just referencing things. So you get to the finale, and on January 6th, Congress is meeting to tally votes to vote on the president, to put the president in power while riots are taking place. I wonder what that's a reference to. Like this is not some satirical take on it. You're literally just saying a thing that happened, but doing it in the world of the boys, without like having any meaningful like joke to come out of it or payoff to it. You're just referencing it. That's what people are frustrated. That's the change. This is on the nose. It's right there. You're just saying January 6th. You're literally saying January 6th. You're literally quoting news headlines from 4 years ago, 3.5 years ago, whatever. That's all this is. And that's not where it started. That's a change in how the show handles its satire, and people are frustrated by that, disappointed by that. People that disagree with the politics of the creators of the show, and people that agree with the politics of the show, they want satire. They don't want people just saying talking points of a side, referencing things, a perspective of a side. They don't want that. And that's what a lot of the season turned into. That's frustrating. Remember to join me down below in the comments section. What did you think about this season? The opinions really are all over the place, where obviously a bunch of people hated it, it's garbage, woke garbage, all of that stuff. They can't say anything positive about it. Then there's people, it's the best season yet, funnier than ever, more on point and relevant than it's ever been. Where do you land in all of this? Are you on a side? Are you right there in the middle? Also, remember to come back in a few days. I will be ranking all of the Boys Verse, the 4 seasons, Gen V, Diabolical, all that fun stuff, probably on Sunday, maybe on Monday. As I said at the beginning, it was a frustrating season because when it hit, it was just as good as ever. Funny, gory in an interesting way, V'd up animals, a political conspiracy, amazing performance from Anthony Starr's Homelander. There's great stuff in here, but it's just bogged down by too many subplots, so it couldn't focus in on the good elements enough, giving too much screen time to things that weren't interesting. And then in that commentary, it just felt like we're referencing things rather than satirizing things, leading to a very disappointing season overall. Remember to join me down below in the comment section. Come back in a few days for my thoughts on the full Boys Verse, whatever it's called. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies and TV too much.